Before even knowing his NFL team, we're already predicting that Ashton Jeanty will be a top 10 fantasy running back in his rookie season. We are digging into our way too early top 10 running back ranks on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, but I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Head over to FanDuel.com now to get started. We are going to go through our positional rankings for the 2025 season this week, starting at running back today. And yes, you might say this is a bit too early, but that's okay, right? This is what we have of information right now. These are going to be our top 10 running backs where we're ranking them at this moment. Now, they can change as the offseason goes on, but let's start with number 10 here because I think it's a spicy one. It's Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. We don't even know where he's going to be drafted yet, but we have him in our top 10 for next year.
Yeah, we're hoping it's going to be a team such as the Cowboys, even the Raiders, somebody that needs a feature back who's going to get a ton of touches immediately. Fresh legs coming into the league out of Boise State, played into the playoffs here. So that was a great season for him, just looking fantastic. He was up there with Barry Sanders among the all-time greatest seasons in college football. So he comes in, surefire first-round pick. Now, there's some talk, will he be joined by Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina or somebody else in the first round? But he's the guy that's going to go in the first round. The Cowboys are picking 12th. That's pretty high, but a lot of places you look, and I have him ranked in the top 10 overall among the prospects. So 12 is not a stretch for him. We saw what happened with Bijan Robinson. He went super early. Jahmyr Gibbs went around this range as well in the first round a couple of years ago. Last year didn't have that same kind of cachet with the first round running back. So now you get Jeanty, can't miss type guy, plug him in the right system. So look, wherever he goes, he's going to step into a big role. The question is it going to be a better team where he's going to get the blocking right? Maybe like you look at the Steelers, right? If he goes later to the Steelers, a team that wins, then you might feel a little bit more inclined. But then you have the Cowboys, who I think will be committed to him more, Brian Schottenheimer. The Raiders, they've got Pete Carroll, so they're going to be looking at it more with Chip Kelly. So wherever he goes, I think what's going to be key is the talent and volume are going to pay off. And that's sometimes all you really need to know about a player to know that he's going to be in the top 10.
Yeah, to really show how talented. I mean, people know like he went off, right? His numbers were crazy, but he averaged over 140 scrimmage yards per game in his college career and scored 50 rushing touchdowns. He's one of just two players since 2010 to hit 140 plus scrimmage yards per game and score 50 plus rushing touchdowns in their college career. The other guy was Jonathan Taylor. But the thing is, Jeanty had more than double the receiving yards and nearly double the receptions as Jonathan Taylor. So that's where he can outshine him. And Taylor's been a very good fantasy back anyways without the receiving. But I mean, every year we see a rookie running back do great, right? I mean, this past year, like you mentioned, there wasn't an elite running back coming out of this class, but Bucky Irving took over in the second half of the season. Devin Achane from 2023 finishes running back 4 in points per game. Gibbs was running back 11. Breece Hall is a rookie running back 7. Najee Harris is a rookie running back 4. Jonathan Taylor and James Robinson running back 6 and running back 7 as rookies in 2020. You can keep going down the list every single year, and there's a rookie that ends high. So I don't think it's boldish to have him here. And honestly, I think we'll probably be moving him up once we know his landing spot. Number 9 is Josh Jacobs. I actually was a little bit lower on him than you. So you really like Josh Jacobs going into this next year. You have him at running back 6. I did have him lower at 10, so it's not anything too crazy. I just think so much of this year depended on touchdowns, right? 16 total touchdowns he scored this year, 15 rushing. And it just seemed like every time they got near the end zone, it was a rushing touchdown. Well, the year prior, it was always Jordan Love throwing touchdowns. And we said, some of those will probably go to the running backs this year, but I think it went to the opposite end of the spectrum. I think that we could find more in the middle, where it's a little bit of love passing, a little bit of rushing touchdowns, and that could just bring down Jacobs a little bit as we head into next year.
Yeah, you look at the stretch that he put up near the end of the season, that really vaulted him pretty high in the average scoring. He finished as the average RB7 and half point PPR, had multiple 20-point games after that bye that came. It was in week 10. So you went from 11 through 18, where Josh Jacobs was really good, right? He kind of put the Packers offense on his back, and sometimes that is a indicator of things to come, that he's going to have another big year in Green Bay. You're right, the touchdowns can be pretty volatile. And look, it was about where I put him there. I bumped him up from 7 to 6. You dropped him down from 6 to 10. Like, these are probably reasonable results for him in this offense, and a very good team overall with the Packers, with Matt LaFleur scheming the offense. I think they'll get better in the passing game. I don't think Jordan Love suddenly revs up the running and scoring here on that end of what they do, but they could be a better, more effective passing team, right? You figure if they get the right weapons for Jordan Love, that might cut into Jacobs a little bit, but I just like the way he ran. I think he had something to prove last year after being jettisoned, not re-signed by the Raiders, just a couple years removed from winning the rushing and scrimmage title. So I still think he has some good years left. The system is very effective here. We'll see if they factor in any other backs, right? We didn't see anyone come into the mix because A.J. Dillon went down immediately. You didn't really have any rookie option there either to spell him with the changes in Green Bay. So there were a lot of changes, but Jacobs definitely looked a lot more effective because he's younger and had the power workload than Aaron Jones in this particular system. And that's why I think he'll keep up here. He's probably one of the more safe or solid picks across the board, I would think, in 2025.
Yeah, the targets is what scared me. It was his lowest since rookie season, and it was 43. I mean, he had 54 in 2023 in just 13 games played. So they didn't utilize him as a receiver all too much. He did score his first receiving touchdown, though, in his career. So there is that. Now, moving on to our consensus running back 8, that's Christian McCaffrey. And now I am really holding this for us because he would not have been in our top 10 without me. I have him all the way at 4, and you have him at 13. So we are widely different about Christian McCaffrey as we sit here in February 17th. He is only 28 years old right now. He does turn 29 in June, and I get it, right? It was a disastrous season of injuries, and we've seen quite a few of those from him. I mean, in 2020 and 2021, it was 2 straight years of, like, can we ever trust this guy? And then he put together 2 years of health. And then last year with the Achilles tendonitis, which is always scary because it can flare up. But I do think the knee injury he got towards the end of the year may have saved him for next year, right? He really allowed that Achilles to fully heal instead of pushing it for no reason. They weren't making the playoffs. So I do think he's going to come back healthy. I'm not worried about him being 29 years old. Maybe I'll be worried once he hits 30. But he's going to be utilized heavily with Kyle Shanahan. He loves his, one running back system, especially when CMC's healthy. He's going to get the receptions. And I know he didn't score a touchdown in his 3 games played, a little bit more than 3 games played, but those will come next year.
Yeah, I think that you're going to see a variety of rankings here for Christian McCaffrey. I mean, Michelle has the confidence he'll be healthy. I'm kind of hedging my bets. Will he be healthy? Will he not be? I'm putting him right outside the RB1. It's probably to make a point consciously to say, look, there's a lot of good running back values that you don't come with the same risk as McCaffrey. It's not just the age, right? Direct age, but it's also the mileage. What does he have in terms of the workload from his past? It's kind of weird because every time he gets hurt, he's saved from extra mileage. It's an interesting thing that happens, right? But in a weird way, you rest your entire body. If you have a small injury, it helps you get fresh everywhere else, and you come back kind of rejuvenated and able to do that. So I hope that's the case with Christian McCaffrey. I'm rooting for this dude. I've always liked him running. He puts everything into it, right? Whether it's receiving, rushing, he is going full speed ahead. And this is why he's in the line of injuries quite a bit, right? He's always giving his biggest effort. Like, he's a borderline Hall of Famer for what he's already done here with the 49ers and with the Panthers. So I'm rooting for him. I think, again, if I knew 100% that I would get a full season of him and back to close to his real form, I would say, yeah, he's going to be up there, the top 4 for me. But I just have a little trepidation. That's why we're hedging our bets a little bit, but we'll have a lot better clarity of that as we go forward in the offseason.
I will say, I do think like the consensus 101 will be Saquon Barkley next year. CMC is 8 months older than Saquon Barkley. That's it.
Yeah.
They both had health issues throughout their career. Saquon just got a massive workload, just like CMC got in 2023. Yeah. And guess, I mean, Barkley kind of is going this path where he won Offensive Player of the Year. Like, he'll probably be on the Madden cover, maybe too. Hopefully not. Barkley, stay off the Madden cover, please. CMC Madden cover curse just continues. But I don't know if we should be so drastically worried about CMC if we're not about Saquon Barkley. I don't think they're all that different.
No, you're right. I mean, we just have to weigh all that. And look, there's risk with every running back. I mean, this is a brutal position. You can tear your ACL, fall down. You can have an injury that's nagging the entire season. Anybody is susceptible to this, and also playing through an injury that kind of slows a player down. So I think that's kind of the worst. Like, you want an ultimate answer, right? Can they play through the season, or are they just down and you can move on and try to find answers? Now, we'll try to find answers there. Rest of our top 10 will count from 7 down to 1. We'll see if Saquon Barkley indeed is the number 1 and who's ahead of him here in our next segments. As Michelle told you at the top, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's America's #1 sportsbook. It is over the All-Star weekend, so when the game tips off, the NBA action is getting started for the second half, down the stretch into the playoffs. There's no better place to get in on than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. Those are a lot of fun with player points and looking at the matchups and see who's going to win. So a lot of good stuff here. Again, Luka Doncic is exciting at this time of year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander trying to get on some of these superstar players and their teams. Those are a great way to get in the same game parlay. And right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if you first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Michelle, let's reveal our consensus #7 running back here on the list. Again, I think we both had him in similar spots, but it might surprise some people, but I think he deserves it after his fine rookie year.
Yeah, we both actually we had him ranked the same, and he came into our running back 7 in consensus. He was both of our running back 8s in our individual rankings. But listen, we have him right where he was the second half of his rookie season. So from weeks 10 through 18, he was a running back 7 in fantasy points per game, behind only Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, and Chase Brown, who had a really nice few games in there as well. But he averaged, like, in games that he had just 10 carries. He had 8 games with 10 plus carries in his rookie season. He averaged 18.7 points per game in half PPR. And 7 of those 8 games came from weeks 10 on. So when they actually started to use him, he was a rookie, remember. That would have put him just slightly lower than Derrick Henry this past year, who averaged 19.2. It would have been higher than Bijan Robinson, who was running back 4 this year at 18.3. Bijan was at. So, like, Bucky Irving in the second half of his rookie season, he was elite.
Yeah, I mean, you start and look at his overall body work for not really having the clear role over Rachaad White, and then he had that random Sean Tucker game in there. Let's not forget, he still finished at RB19 in average scoring half-point PPR. This is despite several games just being just not effective, where he wasn't getting the ball enough. Several under 5 fantasy points, right? So you throw out some of those games, and Michelle's right. He's an elite running back that creeps straight into the top 10 with top level production. And again, I think they made it clear that he was the guy over Rachaad White. White should be relegated more to a receiving role, but Irving is not a total zero in that role. He can handle himself in those situations, but definitely the scoring opportunities, and this team does score a lot. I mean, I think that will still be the case. Minus Liam Cohen, they're still going to be in position to score a lot with this passing game with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans, and we'll see if they bring back Chris Godwin, but Jalen McMillan. If you a prolific offense that scores a lot. It's going to be great for your running back no matter what. Irving is a great finisher, so I could see him easily break double-digit touchdowns and then add a little bit more to his workload because, again, he started slowly, but I think now he's going to go in as a feature where Rachaad White is going to be more of a change of pace. So I'm excited to see what Bucky Irving can do in year 2. His talent really flexed and manifest pretty early as a rookie, and they had no choice but to kind of give him that key role over Rachaad White.
Yeah, I don't think he looked like a late round running back that just got chances, and that's why he just got the volume. It wasn't just volume. He looked great out there. So I'm happy to have him inside our top 10. Number 6 is Jonathan Taylor. He was running back 5 in points per game this past season. Now, a lot of that had to do with his end of season explosion. I mean, he completely went off towards the end of the season. He did start well, though, too. It was that middle of the season. He was injured for a little bit, then couldn't score a touchdown at all. And I remember saying, like, before his explosion, like, the touchdowns will come. He's never had issues scoring touchdowns in his career. This was never a thing. It just was a weird touchdown drought during that time. But he scored touchdowns in weeks 1, 3, and 4, and then not again until 16, 17, 18. And, he was scoring multiple at a time in week 16 and 17. But in the 7 games, he scored at least 1 touchdown this season. He averaged it was 23.5 fantasy points per game. So nearly 24 points per game and half PPR. Like, that's an insane amount of points. I would have easily put him at number 1. But I mean, I'm only using the games where he scored a touchdown, so kind of cheating. But he was getting a ton of carries too. 5th most carries in the NFL this past year, despite missing 3 games. So we know JT is going to get the workload next year. He's going to score the touchdowns, and the only thing really lacking is the receptions.
Yeah, the one thing that also did not help him was the Colts offense being in flux. I mean, going from Anthony Richardson to Joe Flacco, a different style of passing, different style of quarterback completely, right? One guy that's going to cut into his rushing yards, one guy that's going to do nothing to affect Jonathan Taylor's rushing yards and not going to take away any goal line chances as well. So I think that would help. Some stability from the Shane Steichen Colts offense where Jonathan Taylor is getting these chances to score. They're moving the ball and not just big play dependent, right? Just looking for the big shots downfield to Michael Pittman Jr. or Alec Pierce. They need to be able to sustain some drives where Jonathan Taylor can get the ball inside the 10, inside the 5, and do what he does best and finish them. And I think those opportunities just came to finish, right? In those early season games, Richardson kind of got his confidence back late in the season. It's not a surprise he didn't do a lot of scoring with Flacco because I think this offense in general kind of went into the tank a bit. So I'm hoping the offense as a whole rebounds. I really liked him last year. I thought he was going to be the guy that ascends number 1. Unfortunately, the touchdowns didn't come to do that, but I was quite surprised to say he was all the way up. And this is including 3 missed games, right? He had 3 games where he didn't play early in the season as well. So that kind of maybe threw it off a little bit where it needed time to get back into the mix and deliver that number. But I think if he stays healthy, he can have a big year. He's one of those guys, short list, capable of finishing as the RB1 on the board if things start rolling for him.
Yeah, he definitely is. And now the receptions keep him a little bit harder to get to that running back 1, but I think he is super safe. Like when we were comparing him to Josh Jacobs, I do think he's even safer than him. And that's why we have him higher. But number 5, we're keeping old man Derrick Henry up here. I mean, I don't know what else to do, right? Every year he just keeps balling out. Running back 3 in total points and points per game in 2024, his first year with the Ravens. 16 rushing touchdowns, and it felt like it could have been more, right? It didn't feel like this crazy year for him. It just seemed so easy. Anytime that got around the goal line, he got the chance, he scored. And it's not to say we can't really sit here and say, well, those are going to go down. I mean, pretty much every year he has 12 plus rushing touchdowns. And now he's in a great offense with the Ravens. So there's no reason he can't hit 16 again. Sooner or later, the wheels will fall off because of his age, but I can't tell you when.
Yeah, he's just defied all odds in terms of his durability, his strength, having that much speed for a man that big and strong. So again, he's a Hall of Famer, and Hall of Famers have an extended shelf life on what they can do, especially when they're in a perfect offense. And again, look what happened. I mean, you put Derrick Henry in offense where you still had Lamar Jackson to have 4,000 plus yards, get all his rushing yards, But Derrick Henry was, again, the goal line guy. They didn't really force Lamar Jackson, slam him in. They don't do the tush push thing with him. I mean, it's really Mark Andrews what's in there. So short yardage, you're not giving it to Lamar Jackson to get him slammed behind the offensive line. That's the difference, right? I mean, Derrick Henry gets the ball in pay dirt, and we know this offense is totally locked in here. Todd Monken, they know what they're doing. Everything is just like Lamar Jackson setting things up, big plays with his arm. They're near the goal line. Derrick Henry pounds it home. So this is just a great offensive system. It's much better than anything, even those run-heavy plans that Derrick Henry ran in Tennessee. This is much better than that because you have the threat of Lamar. You've got not a lot of touchdown scores they're going to take away from him. So I love it. Derrick Henry, again, he finished as the RB3, so this is very right touch. This is actually a downgrade for him, and it's still very good at RB5.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, sooner or later, we're all going to be wrong about Henry and he's going to fall off. But I'm not willing to be one of those people taking that guess because he still looks like a beast. Our number 4 is Devin Achane of the Dolphins, running back 11 in points per game in 2024 after finishing as the running back 4 in points per game in his 2023 rookie season. It really wasn't all that different in points per game. It was 16.1 as a rookie, 15.4 in 2023. It felt a little worse because his efficiency was way down from a rookie, but we knew that was going to happen. He was averaging 7.8 yards per carry as a rookie. He's still a very solid 4.5 this year. 6 rushing touchdowns, down from his 8 as a rookie by 2. But Raheem Mostert just got released by the Dolphins. He got 203 carries this past year. And whenever Tua was there, he was great for fantasy. And then when Tua was out, he was really, really bad. But he led all running backs in receptions and receiving yards this year as well. And when Tua's there, he targets him like crazy. Achane is just one of those kind of like cheat code guys, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting transition, right? I mean, part of that scoring average in his rookie year, that monster debut where he was touching the ball like very little and scoring a lot and reeling off big plays. And we knew that wasn't going to be this path to scoring again because that's not sustainable or realistic. So instead, he kind of reinvented his role a little bit. He was used more as a short area receiver as the season went on. Remember that pivot we saw after Tua came back from the injuries? It was shorter passing to Jonas Smith and Devin Achane, and less of that downfield throws to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Like, I don't know if that'll still be the game plan, but maybe they're still being careful with Tua, getting the ball out quickly from his hands. That's why his completion percentage is always so high, just getting rid of the ball so he's not taking those hits. So Achane proved to be a great outlet receiver then, and then everyone else dropped off, right? Mostert, I mean, look at this drop off for Mostert. Like, he was a touchdown machine. No one was really high on him going into the season. And we saw why, right? He was just filling a hole, plugging a gap until you had somebody to take over. And Achane was up for the task to be the feature back. So I'm excited what he can do. Again, he finished as a slow starter, RB11 in average. So we are moving him up here a lot, 7 spots. It's aggressive, but I like it. He seems primed for a big year 3.
He does. Now we have 3 more running backs to go in our top 10, our top 3. And man, it's a close race here. We will get to that to close out today's show right after a quick break. All right. I will say our 3 and 2, we're tied consensus wise because we have them flip back and forth. You have Jahmyr Gibbs at number 2 and Bijan Robinson at number 3. And I have Bijan at number 2 and Gibbs at number 3, right? So these 2 are totally interchangeable. And I will say, even our number 1, who I'm sure you've guessed by now, it's Saquon Barkley. They're all, I mean, I really think any of these 3 guys could be number 1, and I would be fine with it. I think there's an argument for all 3. With Bijan, let's just say he's our 3 for right now. He was running back 4 in total points and in points per game this last season. But he started slow. He averaged 21 points per game in half PPR from week 6 through 18. That was the most among running backs. He only was scoring 11.7 points per game from weeks 1 through 5. So very slow start for him. I think he's going to have the same workload he saw this past year. Hopefully the offense is a little bit more efficient and better without Kirk Cousins and with Michael Penix Jr. back there. Same coaching staff. And I think his touchdowns are repeatable. He had 13 rushing touchdowns. I don't think that's anything too crazy that he can't repeat. So I think Bijan Robinson's going to be fantastic next year.
Yeah, it was great to not have Arthur Smith there, right? And have a Zach Robinson who came from the Rams, who are used to being a one-back team with Kyron Williams as the current lead guy there. So we saw that to some degree in other versions of the Rams offense spread across the league, but it's conducive for big fantasy performances from a lead back. And Bijan Robinson, they finally unleashed his potential. Took a while here, and he could actually have a bigger receiving role, right? You have Michael Penix, a younger guy. He's got a big arm too, like Kirk Cousins, but he might be more inclined to check down a little bit, get the ball out when he can't get it downfield to Drake London or Darnell Mooney. Take advantage of this. And you know what would be also big, Michelle, something we're going to watch for? I think Kyle Pitts could be on the move in a trade, so let's watch that. And if that's the case, then you have a short area receiver where Bijan's going to have to take over even more of that role. So something to watch out for. And Pitts really didn't cut it any of the touchdowns, but I like it that they separated. They realized Robinson was a superior talent to Tyler Algier. Look, Algier's serviceable backup, can handle the little things when he's out there, but he should not be on the field in key situations over Bijan Robinson. So we finally figured that out. We got through that hurdle, and Bijan started to live up to his talent that was immense coming into the league.
It was, and so was Jahmyr Gibbs, right? And I'm fine with these guys being interchangeable at 2 and 3 and 1. But Gibbs was a running back 2 in both total points and points per game in 2024, and that's with still splitting a lot of games this past year with workload with David Montgomery, right? And then he did get to have his moment without David Montgomery towards the end of the year, and obviously shine there, but anytime the Lions have to give Gibbs 15 plus carries, he's amazing. Or like just depend on him, I should say, not that specific number. But there were 8 games this year where he had at least 15 carries in the game. He averaged 23.6 fantasy points per game in those games. To compare that to Bijan, when he got 15 plus carries, that was 12 games because his workload was a little bit more consistent. He averaged 20.8. Both of those are great, but Gibbs averaged 3 more points per game than Bijan when he's getting the workload. So I totally get it. Like if Gibbs is going to get the workload that Bijan's going to get, I do like Gibbs more. I think Gibbs is a bit more explosive. They're both good receiving backs. And at the moment, Gibbs seems to be on still the much better offensive team, right? That you feel most confident about going into next year for the touchdowns. It's just about splitting with David Montgomery. And I don't think Bijan will really be splitting with anyone next year. That was my only difference between these two. But both of them are top 3 guys for next year.
Yeah, without Ben Johnson, you could also see a fade in David Montgomery's workload and the key touches. Like Montgomery's still going to be a factor, but he's also getting older. He seems to be hurt every year, and he's had a little bit more just wear and tear from his days with the Bears when they were trying to work him in there a lot as a feature back. So Jahmyr Gibbs has a fresh legs. He's in his prime. And you're right. I mean, he still finished very high with Montgomery factoring in. We'll see what they do with the new OC going in the Denver Broncos direction here, barring from their play calling. So it'll be interesting. I think that could only raise Gibbs's profile as a receiver, right, with the connection to Sean Payton and all that. So I think they'll try to use him in that capacity a little bit more to play off what they have in the downfield passing game. So, again, Gibbs, everything, look, we're just picking nits here when it comes to these two guys between Robinson and Gibbs. I mean, one of these guys is going to finish 2 or 3. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of downside to taking either. They have a lot of upside with little downside. That's why I think they belong right behind Barkley.
And I mean, obviously Barkley right now is going to sit at a running back 1. He was the clear running back 1 this year in both total points and points per game. I mean, a good 1.3 more points per game than Jahmyr Gibbs at 2. So there's a little bit of a distance between these two, right? He scored 15 touchdowns. That's great. 13 rushing touchdowns in 16 games played. And that was with Jalen Hurts stealing a ton of rushing touchdowns still, right? That's what we were scared of, but there was enough to go around for both. I will say he has some extremely dominant games, right? And I think that does skew the end of season points. He had 7 games with 20 plus points. Fantastic. And there's a lot of like solid games in there too. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but I'm just saying like when you're looking at the big game, 7 games with 20 plus points, Bijan had 8 games with 20 plus points. Jahmyr Gibbs 6. Bijan had 10 games with 18 plus fantasy points. Barkley only had 8. I mean, it's still a ton. Gibbs had 9. So Bijan was ahead of both of these guys in terms of 20 plus point games, in terms of 18 plus point games. I think I'm going to end up talking myself into Bijan at 101 by the end here. I think that's what I'm doing. But I like them all. And I guess when we're talking about Christian McCaffrey and Barkley, are we worried about the usage on his body? Are we worried about his age just a little bit? And would that move him down past Gibbs and Bijan for you by the time we get to next season?
Yeah, you make excellent points about the big game ceiling that Gibbs and Robinson had. And they also didn't really have games where they totally disappeared. There were some games for Barkley, believe it or not. There were 3 kind of really dud games. I mean, this is a far cry from what we used to see with Barkley with the Giants, right? Because there'd be some games where you just disappear and do nothing, and then you'd explode. And he was also like carry to carry, right? He would have like a 2.8 average and explode, or that would never come in a game. And I think what happened with the Eagles, he just to kind of reach that where he was going to get the offensive line and the offensive support in general to keep that up. But you're right. History shows we've gone back through the years. We've done this several times with this exercise, but we saw with McCaffrey, injury attrition, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor. It goes on really with guys that hit that massive workload, the 350 plus carries in a season, especially in this modern NFL, right? Where this is a lot. I mean, it's tiring. And then you go through the playoffs, all the workload you saw through the Super Bowl. So again, we didn't have that with Jacobs, right? He didn't get on team with the Raiders, and he was still wearing down a bit. So that's my mild concern. I'm an upside guy. Michelle is an upside gal, I think. So when I'm going with that, I'm saying that Gibbs or Robinson has a slightly better chance to finish as 1, but I can also see Barkley being 1 again. I just think we're going to have to keep evaluating that as we keep going on here all throughout the offseason, which we'll do with all the rankings, because it's not the final last thing we're going to say. This is the early part of it, but we just want to show you where we are to know where we're going here later in the offseason.
Yeah, once the draft and free agency is over and deeper into the summer, we will update our running back rankings and all of our rankings and give you that update. Of course, that is it for today's episode. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to us. Give us that like, all that good stuff. We will be back tomorrow going through our top 10 wide receiver rankings for 2025. We'll talk to you then. Bye, y'all.